Good evening, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Good evening and welcome to tonight's event, a celebration of Jefferson Eugene Grigsby Jr. Please share your questions in chat with the option for everyone. Questions will be addressed from the chat. Thank you for coming, and I will now pass the presentation to Jessica Salo, who will share the ASU Library Indigenous Land Acknowledgement and introduce our panelists.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your attendance this evening. My name is Jessica Salo. I am the Assistant Archivist of Black Collections here at ASU Library, and I'm so pleased and so proud to present this event to you tonight regarding honoring the legacy of Dr. Jefferson Eugene Grigsby Jr. We will go ahead and read the ASU Indigenous Land Acknowledgement. The ASU Library acknowledges the 22 Native nations that have inhabited this land for centuries. Arizona State University's 4 campuses are located in the Salt River Valley on ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples, including the Acma Autumn, Pima, and Peeposh Maricopa Indian communities, whose care and keeping of these lands allow us to be here today. ASU Library acknowledges the sovereignty of these nations and seeks to foster an environment of success and possibility for Native American students and patrons. We are advocates for the incorporation of Indigenous knowledge systems and research methodologies within contemporary library practice. ASU Library welcomes members of the Acma Autumn and Peeposh and all Native nations to the library. So we have in attendance today 2 very distinguished panelists, and I'm so pleased to be able to bring them both to you in order to speak to you about the legacy of Dr. Jefferson Eugene Grigsby Jr. First up, we will have Dr. Bernard Young speak. He is the professor at ASU School of Art, and I'll go ahead and read his short bio. Bernard Young received his MFA and PhD from Cornell University. He is a professor of art education at Arizona State University's Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts. He is the author of numerous articles and monographs and co-editor of several books, including the first and second editions of Art, Culture, and Ethnicity. He has exhibited in Soul of a Nation, Art in the Age of Black Power. Currently, he serves on numerous committees, including Committee Co-Chair of Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, JEDI 2020, member 2021 of ASU. He also serves on the Advisory Council on Academic Affairs for the President at ASU. For 34 years, he has directed the Eleanor A. Robb Children's Art Workshop at ASU. 2 current publications include Diversity and Equity in NAEF 75-Year History, which is 2022 in press, and Making Multicultural Education and Art Education an Important Part of Curriculum in a Teacher's Guide, Athora.org, volume number 2, 2021. Brandywine Workshop and Archives Press out of Philadelphia. Dr. Young, we're so happy to have you with us today. Please go ahead.
Well, it's an honor to be here. And I guess I'll start off with a statement from a group on campus called LIFT, LIF is a part of the group that works with the president's office and the advisors to the president. And I'm acknowledging them because one of their initiatives is, and I'll read it, in order to accelerate meaningful change here at ASU and to contribute to a national agenda for social justice, ASU has committed to a series of actions known as the LIF, which is Listen, Invest, Facilitate, Teach initiative. And these actions are in response to accumulation of ideas, public comments from ASU students, faculty, and staff. It's listed as T9, fund and sustain the community-driven archives initiative in the ASU Library, and in order to enhance the historical records and the community's engagement with underrepresented communities. So I'm very happy that the committee can make recommendations and they're moving forward, and that's one of 25. So Dr. Eugene Grigsby. Some of my students sometimes will say, why do you call yourself doctor? You're in a building with a bunch of art professors, and 98% of them don't call themselves doctors. And I tell them two reasons. One, I'm Black. There aren't too many of us. And the other reason, the others don't have doctorates. They're artists and they have MFAs. Anyway, so that was a big thing. Dr. Grigsby was always Dr. Grigsby to me. He wasn't Eugene. I didn't know him as Gene Grigsby. He was a multimedia artist, an author, educator, a community activist, primarily using printmaking and painting as his means to express himself. His style of painting was abstract and expressionistic, and was heavily influenced by his experiences in Africa, his culture, and his family. His family was extremely integral and a big part of what he did and what he made and how he really functioned in all those years, decades and decades. Here's a statement I didn't think I was going to read twice, but I'll read this too. It's from a project we worked on together in a book. And the book is called, the chapter is called Afro Culture and the White Ghetto. The white ghetto becomes more potent when one considers that little of the culture of the African has been made available in schools and colleges in America. Black as well as white children are deprived of this knowledge. Even more destructive is the fact that these children are taught little about African culture, and as a result, they lack important role models, art, and artists from Africa and of African American heritage, and are important for Blacks and whites and other ethnic groups that serve as role models or heroes to emulate and respect. That was just a small part of the chapter, and I believe it's available in your library. We'll talk about that later. The book is. But I was impressed with the fact that Dr. Grigsby he was not confused about his belief that we needed to uplift African Americans because we have a whole lot of problems. And it made me look at Richard Wright's book that's called 12 Million Black Voices. And so he did research on Black people, and he did research not only on Black people, but he was interested in doing research on various colors of people in the rainbow, but he never de-emphasized the fact that Black people had unique problems that were in America, and they need to be addressed, and they still need to be addressed. He was influential as an educator, both in college and in schools. He taught at Carver High School, and when it was desegregated, he went to Phoenix Union to teach there. And then years later, he was involved in coming to ASU, and he was an adjunct professor and then later became a professor. And he really worked up his way through the ranks in the university system. In 1954, Dr. Grigsby wrote an article. He wrote an article on teaching art at Harvard High School, and that gave him national attention. People want to know more about what he was doing in Phoenix. And the NAEA published this article. And when following a court order segregation in 1954, I already said this, he left Carver and went to the Phoenix Junior High School. So this national attention made him into a different person than he would have been if he was at the convention and did not have publications. And people started coming around him and talking to him, and they wanted to know more about his work in Phoenix, Arizona. When I met him, he introduced me to a group that he worked with called the Consortium of Black Artists and Others for the Arts, COBA. And I said, COBA, what's COBA? He explained it to me, and he was the founder of COBA and Others for the Arts. He also was the founder of the ABC group, Artists for the Black Community. And I joined him in both groups, but especially the ABC group. And we would have meetings with artists in the community. And they weren't necessarily artists that were university trained, but they were artists that were a vast group of people with different types of skills and talents. And we exhibited throughout Phoenix. We made available to children and young artists, especially those in the inner city, exhibitions, awards, and scholarships that reached thousands of youngsters. So he had, with COBA, he would invite children to be in an exhibition in a building that was ran by OIC. And OIC is the Operation of Industrialization. And so he had this building where they would have an exhibition there, and we were invited there, and he would have us put walls up. That was a whole lot of fun. And then after we would put the walls up, then we would actually have judges there that would judge the children's work. And then he went out and he made, he raised money to pay for scholarships of the winners. So he made a competitive environment for these inner city children to hang their work in different, most schools in that area, in the downtown area, were invited. And then that would follow up with a luncheon that he had for the children and their parents. And that was in various places, but I remember clearly it was on ASU's campus also. And ASU supported that endeavor. So he was reaching many, many people, and especially young people. So this place I mentioned, OIC, is the Opportunities Industrialization Center. And that place I was very familiar with when he told me about it, because that started in Philadelphia. And that was founded by Reverend Leon Sullivan. And Dr. Sullivan worked with the federal government, and they had divisions of OIC across the country. And they had one here in downtown Phoenix. And he developed there a program for arts and job development. It was a mentoring program for youth and unemployed people. I got to mention Gene Blue, who was the director. I believe he's still the director at OIC downtown. And so they were really partners in many ways with the OIC program. He was a cultural entrepreneur. He brought cultural acts, cultural exhibitions, and all different types of culture and manner to the Phoenix area. And many times it was cultural activities that people hadn't seen before. For instance, he brought Maya Angelou to Arizona, Romare Bearden, Catherine Dunham, Harry Belafonte, Elizabeth Catlett, Danny Glover, Jacob Lawrence, and Hal Wolfworth, his former instructor. And it was many, many others. This is just an extremely small list. And these people were brought here, they were brought here in high style. I mean, they were in the Hilton Hotel downtown. People were dressed in their finest clothes. And they would go there and they had a dinner, and they would have interactions and entertainment from many of these people. And the visual artists that were brought in he also had programs for inner city children and others that he brought in to the area. So he was constantly moving, constantly thinking, and all the time coming up with new ideas of how to put forward culture in Arizona. He had a huge influence on the art education field. The National Art Education Association created an award in his name. And he also created in the 1970s, the Black Caucus. And that was a serious group that challenged the bylaws and the way that the National Art Education Association functioned. When we would go there, there were extremely few African Americans at the association. Later, if you look them up on the website, that group is called the Committee on Multi-Ethnic Concerns, and they're dedicated to articulating the importance of respecting diversity in public schools. And maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but some people may wonder, how did I meet Dr. Grigsby, and how in the world did I get to Arizona? And so I met Dr. Grigsby when I was just getting out of school in the 1970s, late 70s. And I went to my first or second convention, and I was walking around trying to figure out where I was, who all these people are that were out there. And so I saw this guy that had great charisma, and I saw folks walking behind him and walking beside him. And I thought, my goodness, let me run over here and find out who this person is. At least, I mean, they're brown and they're white and they're all kinds of colors. So I eventually met him and shook his hand. And then he, over the years, we knew each other, and we also served on committees that he was the chair of. And then he told me one day, he said, you know, when I retire, I want you to take my place in Arizona. And I said, do what? I have a job. And so he talked to me and he said, well, just think about it. So about 2 years later, he did retire. And then I was invited to, fill out an application and apply to come to Arizona. And that was 34 years ago. Didn't know I was that old, huh? So I've been here for a while, enjoying it. So he also served as the chair of the art department of these high schools that I mentioned, Carver, and also the Phoenix Union High School. And I mentioned also he became a professor at Arizona State University. And the way I understood the story, he drove to NYU during the summers to work on his PhD. Now, that's a lot of persistence and determination. And he did that. And he received his PhD and came back and kept doing his research and working in the community. And he was, of course, promoted through the ranks at Arizona State. One of the best ways to understand Dr. Grigsby's teaching philosophy is in his visionary and thoughtful book, Art and Ethnics, Teaching Youth in a Pluralistic Society. That's in your library. And it was called the first book written by African American on art education. Now, it's not the first book written on art. I mean, there was some hotshot people, James Porter, people like that at Howard University. But he wrote about art education and about teaching children. And in that book, it becomes very clear when you read it that he was concerned with people of all colors, people that were underserved people that were Black, brown, yellow, red, and the list went on and on. And so he had a very inclusive scope on working with different people over the years. So he became a huge hit with his book. And then I have a huge note here saying that I need to mention Thomasina Grigsby, his wife. She was a huge supporter. She was enduring over the years. She was a wise person. Whenever I spoke to her, she gave me a lot of wisdom. She was a loving person, and she was a super supporter of her husband. And also, two other people I'll mention, and I won't mention to everybody, but when he, in his book, he wrote that he was very, he got a great deal of support from his two sons, Marshall and Eugene Grigsby, and that they were strong parts of his life that influenced many things that he did. And that's it for now.
Dr. Young, thank you so very much. I'm so happy that you were able to highlight so many of Dr. Grigsby's amazing contributions, not just to ASU, but to the Phoenix area. And, you know, that's some of the history that unfortunately we are missing from our archives, but we're so happy to be able to have his papers now available to folks in order to come and look at some of the things that you spoke about and some of the ways in which he showed up for community, which is, you know, amazing to hear. And so I'm so happy that you were able to be here this evening. So next we're going to highlight, Dr. Young did state his name, but I'll go ahead and do a more formal introduction. Next will be the Reverend Dr. Marshall C. Grigsby. Dr. Grigsby was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, raised in Phoenix, Arizona, and educated in the Phoenix public school system. He went on to graduate with honors from Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia in 1968 with a BA in political science. Upon completion of his undergraduate degree, he matriculated to the University of Chicago, where he completed the Master of Theology and Doctor of Ministry degrees from the university's Divinity School in 1972. His doctoral thesis was titled Politics and the Black Religious Experience in America. Since the completion of his formal studies, he has compiled a distinguished record, in higher education over the last 45 years. Dr. Grigsby's bio is very long and very, very in-depth. And so I'm just giving a little bit of his history here. And so Dr. Grigsby, I'm so ecstatic to have you with us this evening. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. And it's so good to be with you and Rashida and Patricia, and especially with Bernard Young this evening. Let me make a couple of emendations on what Bernard said. First, in reference to my father's wife, my mother, Thomasina. She not only was a great supporter of his, but she was a trained scientist in her own right. And so she had a tremendous career herself. And in addition, when you mentioned the travel to New York to work on his PhD, he did that, and he did that for 10 years in a row. He would pack us in the back of a car. We would drive across country, drop us in Charlotte, drive to New York, do his coursework, and drive back to Arizona. He did that not because he loved to drive, but he did that because the Phoenix school system would not allow him time off to work on a doctorate. And so he was determined to make that happen, and that's what he did, and that was the kind of person that he was. But as I indicated, I'm pleased to be with you on this really auspicious occasion where some of my father's papers are being included and opened at the Arizona State University Archives. And they will continue to inform, to illuminate, to educate future generations. That was his passion. Other papers of his are already included in the archives at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, his birth state. Now, Dr. Young earlier spoke about my father as an art educator and an artist and as a mentor. And that is really is how most people remember him. Yet his vision was much broader than that. His reach, his accomplishments, his knowledge, his skills, his talents were expansive. But not only was he a consummate artist and art educator and mentor, but he was also, what many people didn't realize, he was a band leader, a writer, a poet, a playwright, a photographer, a carpenter, an economic entrepreneur, a storyteller in the truest sense, and an inventor. While he was in the Second World War in the 1940s, he was part of a supply chain division of the Third Army under General George Patton. His unit was assigned the duty of supplying the troops in the front lines. He devised a process for supplying materials that was more efficient, more effective, and more rapid than had been previously used by the United States Army. He received a commendation for those efforts. That union that he served in also was charged with the responsibility of picking up unexploded ordnance, unexploded bombs. It was an all-Black unit, as the U.S. Army was very strictly segregated at the time. And the Black soldiers were given the task of going around picking up the bombs that had not exploded. Isn't that an interesting coincidence that they would assign that to Black soldiers? But those experiences made him fearless. If you can go through that, then you really can challenge and overcome just about any challenge that comes your way. My father was a true Renaissance man. And in the spirit of West African storytellers, he was a true griot. He was born in Greensboro, North Carolina, and his family moved when he was very young to Charlotte. They moved there when his father, my grandfather, was appointed the principal of Second Ward High School in that city. One day, the young Gene Grigsby, had a paper route, and one day he was going around collecting from the homeowners where he delivered the newspaper. And he knocked on a door that was open. And inside the door, he kind of peeked inside the door. He looked around and saw a number of paintings that were lined against the floor. And they were very beautiful works of art. And he asked the homeowner who had painted them, and was told by the artist homeowner that he did. That person's name was Walker Foster. And that was the first time that my father had seen art works done by a Black person. And he was, as he described it, was quite frankly amazed. Mr. Foster was an unlettered person. He was a stonemason and an artist. But he invited that youngster in and put a paintbrush in his hand for the first time. He was 12 years old when that happened. And he took to painting proverbially like a duck takes to water. He completed his first painting at age 12. That very first painting is sitting right here with me. If you could see this, it's remarkable for its color, its detail, its depth, and the description of all of the pieces of that are included here. And that was done by a 12-year-old youngster. He, with his great knowledge of a love of art and what Walker Foster started, it really started him on a lifelong relationship with art. My father graduated from Second Ward High School, where his father was the principal, at age 15. And he enrolled in at Johnson C. Smith College at the time, now Johnson C. Smith University. A year later, a young lady he had met at Smith transferred to Spelman College in Atlanta. And Dad implored his parents to let him transfer to Morehouse College in Atlanta so he could follow his friend to Spelman or to Atlanta. His parents relented, and my father's sophomore year, he enrolled at Morehouse. The relationship with the young lady did not last, but something much more important and meaningful did. And that was he met and became a student of his lifelong friend, mentor, teacher, and advisor, Hale Woodruff. Hale was at the time the head of the art department at Spelman College. Hale, as Bernard mentioned, would later go on to become his doctoral advisor at New York University, where my father received a PhD in art education. When he graduated from Morehouse at age 19, he knew that he needed further training to pursue his passion in art. And he wanted to do so at the American Art School in New York City, but he didn't have any money. So he decided on at the time, a novel economic entrepreneurial experiment. He incorporated himself and sold shares that were to friends and family and others. And those shares were redeemable by those same folks who bought them in the form of future artwork. So if you invest in me, then you could get at a discount future artwork from what will become a great artist. By doing that, he was able to generate enough money to get himself to the Big Apple. And upon arriving there, he encountered a whole new world of art and met lifelong artist friends and mentors. He met several artists who themselves were born and raised in the red clay dirt in and around Charlotte, North Carolina, like himself. People like Selma Burke, the renowned sculptor who designed the bust of Franklin D. Roosevelt that was used for the Roosevelt dime that you have. That was done by a Black woman from the red clay dirt of Charlotte, North Carolina. Others like Charles Austin, an artist and a colleague of his at the Brussels World's Fair Art Pavilion. Romery Bearden, Jacob Lawrence, John Biggers, who is in fact our cousin, and many others. He met and befriended writers like Langston Hughes of the Harlem Renaissance movement, as well as other creative artists. And later on, he would meet a man by the name of Victor D'Amico, the founder of the education department at the Museum of Modern Art. Victor would not only become a mentor of his, but he would also go on to play a very significant role in shaping my father's approach to community art education. After Dad's sojourn in the Army in 1945, he returned to Charlotte, but he couldn't find adequate employment to support his family. He had a brief teaching stint at Johnson C. Smith College, where he had started out, and at Bethune-Cookman College in Daytona Beach, Florida, but they were not sufficient. He was contacted then by a man by the name of W.A. Robinson, who had been the former principal of the lab school at Atlanta University. But he had been appointed principal of an all-Black high school in Phoenix, Arizona, Carver High School. And Mr. Robinson contacted my father and offered him the job of establishing an art department at Carver. He took that job, packed up his family, and moved across country to Phoenix, Arizona in 1946, at a time when nobody knew where Phoenix was. But that's how we got to Arizona. I was 2 months old at the time, and my brother was 2 years old. Carver High School lacked many resources that white schools had, but it had an abundance of talented people. At the time, it was the only high school in Arizona where all of the faculty members had a master's degree. It also had some very, very talented students. One such student was Roosevelt Rip Woods, who not only would become a mentee of my father's, but would later become a colleague in the art department at Arizona State University. Carver provided a wonderful laboratory for my father to experiment with the art of teaching art. He engaged students where they were and helped them see a larger vision for themselves and of the world. Carver was closed, as Bernard mentioned, by the school district just before the Brown versus Board Supreme Court decision that abolished segregation in 1954. All of those faculty members, all of those master's degree faculty members were dispersed throughout the system to various schools, and some were put out of the school system altogether. My father ended up at Phoenix Union High School, where he would stay for the next 12 years. At Phoenix Union, he continued to expand upon his teaching of art. He heavily engaged students in ways that were unconventional at the time. He would load up his car and drive students to Native American Indian reservations to observe art in progress. He took them to museums. He took them to Frank Lloyd Wright's architectural school, Taliesin West, which was just north of Scottsdale, to have them observe working architects. He had Mr. Wright come and speak to his classes along with other famous artists and creative people. He engaged students in advanced research projects, and these were high school students. One of his students remarked that when he asked a student to get a paintbrush, he would not tell them what kind of paintbrush he wanted them to get. He would say, go get a brush from the Monet drawer, or get one from the Rembrandt drawer, or get a Vincent van Gogh brush, or a Renoir brush, or a Picasso brush. And that was done for a reason. It was done as a way to teach them art history. He had them maintain art diaries of their own works on a daily basis. His classrooms were literally beehives of activity. In the early 1960s, that was a period of turmoil in Phoenix, just like much of the rest of the country. We were engaged in our own civil rights activities and sit-ins and demonstrations and advocating for justice and equality initiatives. My brother and I were very much in the middle of all of what was going on there. I mean, we even took over the state capitol in Phoenix to try to get them to enact a civil rights provision before the federal law was passed in 1964. All of that activity had a profound impact on my father's personal artwork. Bernard talked about his work in African masks, which was very real, and he did a lot of that. But the civil rights activity and that movement really helped to inspire him in a different kind of way. And he began to capture that spirit in his own works. One such piece is called The Protesters. That piece that was done in 1965. That piece is right there behind me. And if you can see, that grew out of that spirit. He would not talk a lot about it, but he would inherit the spirit of the movement, and it would come out in his artwork. He did other such works capturing his understanding of that spirit. One was called The Fire Next Time. It was based on the renowned book of the same name by James Baldwin. The theme of justice, or the lack thereof, became a thread running throughout his personal and creative endeavors. One such piece depicting unemployed and hungry residents of the Valley of the Sun was titled, We'll Work for Food. He saw, as he moved around the community, he saw people in varying degrees of need. Another one of his works in that vein was literally the last painting that he did before he died. And that was titled The Job Seekers. And that piece, if you can see, is located right over there, is the last one that he did. It was called the Job Seekers. In 1966, Dad agreed to join the faculty at Arizona State. His good friend Harry Reid had been on him on numerous occasions to get him to leave the high school and come over to the university. He initially didn't want to do it, but finally he decided that he would make the move. And he remained there for 22 years. And Dr. Bernard Young shared with you some of his experiences while he was there. Eugene Grigsby traveled the world, lecturing and conducting research on the links between Native American, African, and African American art. He told many stories about his travels and his time in foreign countries with cultural icons. In 1977, he published the book that Bernard mentioned, Art and Ethics. He taught, mentored, and influenced thousands of young people. He was a pioneer and leader in art education and was a co-founder of the Committee on Multicultural Concerns of the National Art Education Association, as Bernard mentioned. The committee established a scholarship in support of those who did the most to advance that perspective. And that scholarship has now been named in his honor. He was a tireless advocate for community arts, including the founding of COBA, the Consortium of Black Organizations and Others for the Arts, as Bernard mentioned, as well as the Artists of the Black Community Arizona, ABCAZ. His mentor, Victor D'Amico, that I mentioned earlier, from MoMA, from the Museum of Modern Art, was a world-renowned expert on establishing art programs in communities where people lived. His relationship, my father's relationship with D'Amico, helped him to see the value in such programs, and he promoted them throughout his career. He advocated for the creation of art programs in public housing projects, in community centers, and in other places where people congregated. In 1958, he was one of 6 American artists selected by the Museum of Modern Art, again by Dr. D'Amico, to teach at the World's Fair in Brussels, Belgium. That parenthetically was a chance that got both my brother and me to Europe for the very first time. I was in the 7th grade and my brother was in the 9th grade. And that was, he wanted us to have that same experience while he taught in the American Pavilion, along with Charles Austin and 5 other artists over the course of a summer. He also had, while he was there, Princess Grace of Monaco came in with her children to the Children's Pavilion in the World's Fair, at the World's Fair. And he helped her to understand how to teach art to her children. Over the course of his career and his lifetime, he received many awards and recognitions, including those from the National Gallery of Arts, the Arizona History Makers, the Congressional Black Caucus Spouses, and the Danforth Foundation. In 2001, the Phoenix Art Museum held a 65-year retrospective of his work, the title of which is The Eye of Shamba. His works have been displayed in many exhibits throughout the country, and they are included in permanent collections in public and private collections around the world, including the Cape Coast Museum in Ghana, West Africa, of the Smithsonian Museum, the Library of Congress, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, as well as the Phoenix Art Museum, and also the Harvey Gantt Center for African American Culture in Charlotte, North Carolina. They are also currently on display in the ASU downtown building there in Phoenix, where he has about 35 pieces on display still at ASU. In December of 2012, Mayor Greg Stanton of Phoenix presented the inaugural Mayor's Arts Award for Outstanding Visual Artist and gave it to my father. After his death, the award was named in his honor and is presented annually. Jefferson Eugene Grigsby Jr. Left his mark on this community and beyond. And quite frankly, it's fitting to have his papers included in the Arizona State University Archive. And I'm very pleased to be here with you this evening on this program. I will be happy to respond to any other questions that you may have concerning my father, his works, and anything else. Thank you.
Dr. Grigsby, thank you so very much. We're so excited to have you with us this evening and to hear more about your father and his amazing contributions, not just to ASU, but to the Phoenix community and to many communities across the country, it seems like. I wanted to very quickly just speak a little bit about the papers that we have here at Arizona State University Library that are Dr. Grigsby's. Unfortunately, I was not here when initially we were contacted by the Herberger to pick up that collection. My colleague Shannon Walker was the one that was contacted. So I'm going to go ahead and have her speak a little bit about how we came into possession of Dr. Grigsby's papers. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Shannon and have her talk to you all about this amazing collection.
Hello. Okay. I can't show my video, Patty. Yeah, I have to have permission or something. So, oh, nope. There we are. Oh, my bad. Okay, hello. As Jessica mentioned, I had the honor of being the first contact for this collection. And I'm grateful I did, because I appreciated the opportunity to bring it over and catalog it and work on it, and to have correspond with Dr. Grigsby and Dr. Young on it. I think I was initially contacted by Dr. Kayla Coates and Dr. Young, who said there are some materials in this room that's not very used. Can you come over, because we believe they might be very valuable? And sure enough, yeah, we packed up about 11 boxes of materials. A lot of it was photos, slides, prints, negatives, visual material, and just in packing, we could tell that it was significant. And so that's really the end of the story, except I did have the fortune of being able to reach out to and communicate with Dr. Grigsby, and who knew, we were working on and had discovered this collection. We're working on it, and he was very excited for us to be able to give it the highlight, give it the honor that it was due, really. So I appreciate being able to work with both of them, and appreciate being able to play that small part in us being able to have this even event right now. So thank you.
Shannon, thank you so much for talking about just being contacted. And the reason why Shannon was probably contacted is because she's the university archivist at Arizona State University Library. And so, a lot of people do reach out to Shannon and want to talk to her and to kind of contribute to our archival record, especially where university archives is concerned. So I'm just so grateful for you, Shannon, and for Dr. Young and Dr. Grigsby, highlighting just all of the amazing accomplishments and just the amazing life that Dr. Grigsby had and contributed to Arizona State University and to just the Phoenix area, because it sounds like he very much was an advocate for outreach into Black community and into African American schools and different things along those lines. And so it is highly just encouraging to be able to be at this event and kind of have the papers available for everyone to go ahead and research if that is what they like. And as Shannon said, there are so many 35mm slides that are available in this collection. And so if you are interested in seeing so many amazing slides, I've been able to go through a number of boxes in that collection, and it is just so great. And I learned so much of Dr. Grigsby's life in that collection. And so we're at the Q&A portion of this. And so if you do have any questions for Dr. Young or for Dr. Grigsby, please either go ahead and put them in the box, or you can raise your hand, and I believe we can get you to unmute and ask your question to either myself about the collection here at ASU, or to Dr. Young or Dr. Grigsby. So I did have a couple of questions, prepared while people are either thinking about their question or wanting to type out their question. And so I guess my first question would be to you, probably to you, Dr. Grigsby, since you are a little bit more intimately familiar with your father's, life. So our question would be, how did Dr. Grigsby's birthplace of North Carolina affect his art and creative process?
That's a tough question. There were a number of artists who, as I mentioned, came out of the same county, Mecklenburg County in Charlotte, around Charlotte, North Carolina. And many of them didn't know each other at the time, but they then began to coalesce around each other. And he wrote a piece one time about the impact of ripples, how you throw a pebble in a pond of water that's smooth, and the effect of the ripples across the way. And he would say that there were a number of things that helped the creative movement that grew out of Charlotte, and it wasn't accidental. But he never was able to pinpoint exactly what it was. Jokingly, we talk about, the red dirt. Anybody that's been in and around Charlotte, you you hate to walk across the dirt because it gets on your clothes and everything else, and it's hard to get out. But there's something about that red dirt around Charlotte that did something to the creative process.
Wow, that is amazing. I've never personally been to Charlotte, but if for anybody who is local in Arizona, I believe we kind of have like that same phenomenon up in
Sedona.
Sedona. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's like red clay and red dirt, and it very much is one of those areas that feels very connected to the earth and
Well, and they
to
talk about the spiritual dimension of the Sedona experience, and there's something about that. So there may be something there, the connection of red and the dirt and the creative process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Dr. Young, I guess I would also like to ask you, how has the legacy of Dr. Grigsby been within the School of Art? Is there students that came out of that program that now teach at ASU? Do we still have folks who talk about some of his teachings or anything along those lines within the School of Art?
Absolutely. Two of the biggest name people that came out of ASU that worked with Dr. Grigsby, and he was their mentor, was definitely Roosevelt Woods. And I mean, they were very close. And I think Roosevelt Woods was here longer than Dr. Grigsby. And so it was a joke, sort of, like one came, and Grigsby was in high school. And then the other person that came here and did a PhD was Grace Hampton, Dr. Grace Hampton, who later became vice president of Penn State University. And then at the conventions, you would meet other people, groups of people that worked with Dr. Grigsby.
That is so great. I love to hear that.
Who graduated. But
I'm sure
those
there's
people were out there.
Yeah, so I'm sure there's probably so many folks, that have been through the program. And like I said, some of the slides that I've seen, there was a number of slides of just students, that were highlighted in some of their works. Dr. Grigsby very much seemed to be proud of his students and the work that they did, because there are many, many slides that highlight his students' work. And so it's amazing to see. And I hope that if there are any Dr. Grigsby students out there, if you're looking to possibly see if your art is in that collection, please contact us. We would be happy to talk to you about anything that would be in that collection. We are getting some questions in, so I'll go ahead and read off a couple of these. Our first one is from Lisa Camerlocker. Dr. Grigsby, have any of Dr. Grigsby's children, grandchildren, or great-grandchildren acquired his gift and continued the work of your father?
No. I at one point I thought that I would pursue architecture. That was an area that I really was fascinated about, but that didn't pan out. What I ended up doing was, in order to help him work with his work and to catalog his work, I put myself through an art appraisal program at George Washington University here in DC, and was able to gain a deeper understanding and appreciation for the business side, that whole process, and the appreciation side of the works. But all of both my brother and I, as well as the grandchildren, have an appreciation for the importance of art. And that's one thing that we certainly learned. You could not grow up in that household and not develop an appreciation, because the studio was in the house. It wasn't someplace else. So you couldn't get away from it. So that was the process. And for my children and my brother's children, they're surrounded by art themselves, so they have that appreciation. So a long way around saying we don't do it actually, but we appreciate it immensely.
That's great to hear that, again, you kind of have that ability to still have an appreciation and love of art, even though you're not, technically being the artist or having, artistic, contributions. So that's really great to hear. We have another question from Patty Odell. Have such an amazing collection behind you, Dr. Grigsby. Was there one you remember and have from when you were a child? Was there one painted specifically for you?
There are several that he did of us and that are for me. Matter of fact, one of them is in the collection downtown ASU. Many of the works that we have here are works of his, as well as works of his colleagues, works of John Biggers and of Jacob Lawrence and a host of others. So what I mentioned in the last answer was a tremendous appreciation for art. So I'm constantly looking at works and acquiring it, but the protesters up there, I'd like to claim some bit of credit for it, because you can imagine living in a household when you were very much involved in demonstrations and the like. It wasn't always peaches and cream. There was some tension there. And I like to think that a lot of that period, they were works that I see myself in them. And as he completed them, I said, I want that one. And so he would reluctantly do that, as long as I agreed to make it available for whatever exhibit that he has and the like. Another thing that I did when I was in a student at Morehouse, and I don't know whether I caught a bit of his entrepreneurial spirit or what, but I said, let me ask if you would, they don't have to be your first cuts, but if you would send me some prints and John Biggers, and you get a collection of people who would do that, then I'll be your agent and sell them in Atlanta. And I did that. So that was a part of that process. And then one final thing, I served as the 12th president of Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina. And for my inauguration, he organized an art exhibit and got an amazing array of artists to contribute works to that. That probably was one of the most diverse collections of work done by African-American artists that Columbia, South Carolina has ever seen. And so that was a tremendous introduction of artwork by a variety of artists around the country to that community.
I guess Dr. Young as well. Do you know of any paintings that Dr. Grigsby may have done that were influenced by you or that you requested from him?
I think he kept his paintings very close to his chest. And so I never, he actually gave me a print. There was a beautiful print that I have at home. But not too many years ago, he and I were talking, and there's a printmaking shop in Philadelphia. And it's an archival shop there, and it's called Brandywine. And so he started working for the master printer in Brandywine. And they made at least 100 prints. And he got half, and the Brandywine got the other half. And it was absolutely beautiful print. And it took weeks, at least, because they were mailing things back and forth. He had to approve it. And then they would ask him about which colors, and they would give him slots of colors to look at and choose from to put together. And so it was like a sort of a puzzle, putting all those things together. Can I say something else though?
The piece that Bernard mentioned, the Brandywine right over my right shoulder there, that's a piece called Yemen. And it was done at the Brandywine workshop in Philadelphia that he worked on. And that grew out of his work and study in his trips to Africa.
Yes, please go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Knight. Yes, please.
I forgot. Not only did he do the print, by mail and mailing these tubes back and forth, but a few years before that, he and his wife went to Philadelphia to Brandywine, and they stayed there, and I put him up in a hotel, and he worked in the workshop. And he said to me, he said, I was so tired. And he said, but it was a wonderful way to get tired. And so he couldn't wait until the next day to go in there and actually physically be working in the workshop. I
Wow.
want to
that
say
is
something real quick.
amazing.
Shannon,
Yes.
I'd like to say thank you very much for deciding to take on this project, because when the archival work came to me at the university, it was left in front of an elevator, and there were 30 boxes that said U-Haul. And of course, everybody in the building was saying, what is this? Can this stuff move? And then when we finally got it upstairs in a room, it was really a challenge to look at the work and look through it and to try to figure out, how do you put this all together? And Shannon was just as happy as she could be. She said, oh, this is my thing. This is what I do. And I thank Dr. Coates also for calling you on the phone with the first phone call. But it was a big challenge. And there are all these professors that retire. I get emails all the time about, can we put some work in the archives at the university? And I'm saying, hey, hold it. You know, we're not a warehouse. We can't do that. But it took a professional to go through those boxes and to figure out what would be the most useful thing to get this archive started. So thank you.
Yes,
You're
thank
welcome.
you. Thank you, Shannon. We greatly appreciate you. We have another question here. It's for Dr. Young. What activities are you currently involved in that celebrate Dr. Grigsby's impact on you and the community?
Well, maybe two things. One thing is when I went to the NAEA with the projects that I work on, I'm working on different writing projects, and that's what I do. And then it becomes somewhat of a headache when every time you look up and turn around, there's a new deadline for what's going to happen and with your evaluation. This year at the NAEA, their 75th book on the history of NAEA is coming out. And the first time that they wrote about the Black Caucus at NAEA, Dr. Grigsby was the author. And so my connection to that is, in the 75th edition, they asked me to be the author.
Wow, that's great to hear. I'm so happy to hear that. So we actually have two questions, and so I don't know if Dr. Young or Dr. Grigsby, either one of you would like to comment on this, but I have one person who wanted to know about Dr. Grigsby's special cards with original art, and then somebody else in the comments asked about Dr. Grigsby did an annual holiday card that was sent to many throughout the world. Is there a complete collection of the cards within these papers? As far as I know, I don't believe there are, but Dr. Grigsby or Dr. Young, do you have a complete collection of these cards?
Well, there's not one collection of all of the cards that I'm aware of. I'm very much aware of the cards, and let's tell you a little story about that. Well, first of all, that was a practice that he learned from Hale Woodruff. Hale Woodruff had his students do an annual card. It ended up being a Christmas card, and that was a part of his training process. So that's where he got the idea originally. And when he began to do that, it started out as a Christmas card that everybody loved to get, and I've got probably a dozen of them on the walls around here. But everybody loved to get them. What they didn't realize is that blew our Christmas holidays, because we had to go down and hand screen all of those cards that went out, and the ones that we really had challenges with were those that were multicolored, where you had to screen them 2, 3, 4, and 5 times. You screen them once, you get a clothes hanger and you hang them up to dry, then you screen them again to get another color done. So they really were literally works of art, and people would keep them. And then there would become, after the mailing list got larger and larger, it would slip from Christmas, then it would be into January, then it would be like a New Year's card, and then it would be just whenever they came out. So that happened over the years, but that was a wonderful gift to many people who received them. It was an awful lot of work for my brother and me and the family.
These cards sound amazing. I know some family who do these very extravagant Christmas kind of like announcements, cards and different things. And so I'm sure nowadays it's probably a little bit easier to do them than what you remember, Dr. Grigsby. That's really great to hear. But I'm sorry that your holidays were a little bit busier than probably you anticipated as a child.
I loved every moment of it in looking backwards. So I wouldn't change a thing for that experience.
That's so good to hear. So we have a couple of more questions. I have one that is asking, it sounds much like Dr. Grigsby's outreach was focused on educating youths about art. Why was that so important to him?
Everybody needs art. It's very important that to have children have art. One thing that I didn't do in the same way that Dr. Grigsby did is he went in the community and had art classes with children in the community. And then I was on campus. He said, "Why are you staying on campus?" And I said, "I got my reasons." And I've been running a thing called the Children's Art Workshop. And so with the Children's Art Workshop, we had literally thousands of people come through the workshop, but it also was a way to recruit diverse students, multicultural students to ASU.
Yeah.
Okay, you want another one?
No, this
There's
is
another one.
That's so good. I'm so happy to hear that. Dr. Grigsby, would you like to answer this, or do you know of the origins of why your father was so important about educating the youth about art?
I think there were a couple of reasons. One, because it was such a passion of his, the whole art process. And as I mentioned, he got started at a very young age, and he realized how important that was for him. And so he thought that, and he always loved children and young people. He was always animated and energized being around young people. So that it really was kind of a no-brainer for him to realize that if you catch people young enough and get them instilled enough in appreciating art, then that will change their perspective on life. They may not be artists or even do anything in an artistic field, but it would have an impact on how they looked at the world and how they understood the creative process. And I think that's what was most important for him. And the fact that that he learned from one of the real masters, Victor D'Amico, about the importance of educating children in art. And so I think all of those experiences kind of came together. Just for your audience, this is one of those Christmas cards that he did as on his annual as an annual Christmas card, and he would always accompany it with kind of a story of what happened to the family in the last few months. So that's kind of what they looked like.
That is so beautiful. I love those colors. I'm a fan of red. I love red so much, and so that looks amazing. And again, like I feel like, you know, people have been doing kind of these announcements, you know, Christmas announcements, and doing it all very professional and stuff like that. So it's always so amazing to see and to hear about folks who did it prior to the internet age, and, you know, kind of the ability to do very easy printing with just printers and stuff like that, and just the amount of work that went into something like that. And it sounded like Dr. Grigsby was very dedicated to that. So I'm so happy that there's still some around. And Patty said in the thing that it looks like we have about 22 of them available in the collection. So I'm so happy to hear that there are some available for folks to go ahead and look at. So it looks like we have one more question here, and this particular person wanted to know, what do you think Dr. Grigsby would think of the ASU Lift initiative, considering his own philosophy regarding arts education was all about inclusivity?
I think he would love it. When I came here, there was a group called the Black Caucus that Dr. Grigsby was involved in. And then we found out very quickly that the Black Caucus included staff and faculty members. And the people that were faculty members realized they couldn't get information from the Black Caucus about promotion and tenure. So then they sort of split and became two groups. And then one became a group that was working with faculty members on promotion and tenure. And so years later, today, we have like the President's Advisory Group, and we have subdivisions of the advisory group. And the President's been very active in creating committees and trying to get things off the ground to improve the lives of African-American faculty members, staff members, and students. And what was impressing me about that was, as I'm on one of the search committees, is he didn't say this particular initiative is going to be one that we go out and get a Black person, a yellow person, and a red person, and an Asian person. He's basically said, on this initiative, we are going out to get more African-American faculty members. And then when you go out there and you try to find African-American faculty members, you find out it's a huge, huge problem.
Okay.
I mean, they're not just standing around waiting for a job. If they get out of school and they're doing well, they usually get jobs very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that I really appreciate about the LIFT initiative is just its very specific and focused attention to Black faculty, staff, and students. And so that is absolutely just one of the very important things. And as Dr. Young highlighted, Community-Driven Archives Initiative was a part of the LIFT initiative. We were number 23. And without that support from the university, my position as Assistant Archivist of Black Collections and Black Collections in general just would not be here today if it was not for the support of the LIFT initiative. And so we are so appreciative and thankful to Dr. Crow and to the LIFT initiative for doing that call out and reaching out into the ASU community to uplift Black faculty, staff, and students and our voices and our needs. Absolutely.
And it starts at the top.
It absolutely does.
Straight to the top.
Absolutely.
So you don't have a dean below him saying, I'm not doing that. The deans all fall in line and do what the president says is good for the university.
Absolutely.
So that's good as long as he's here.
Yes. Well, I wanted to go ahead and close us out with a comment. I'm seeing Alma Robinson in the chat here, and it sounds like she is a cousin of your family, Dr. Grigsby. And so I wanted to close out with this comment that Alma just put here and says, I always very grateful for Cousin Eugene's encouragement and support of my work as Director of California Lawyers for the Arts. It also meant a lot to me to get his annual Christmas letters. And so I'm just so appreciative that the entire Grigsby family and extended family was able to come tonight and to hear from Dr. Grigsby and Dr. Young, just the amazing life that Dr. Grigsby led, and that all of the influence that he had, not just on his direct family, but his family here at ASU as well. And so I want to thank Dr. Young, Dr. Grigsby, so much for all of your patience, all of your time putting this event together, and to just be with us tonight to talk about the amazing life of Dr. Jefferson Eugene Grigsby Jr. I'm so happy to be able to be the steward of his collection, and we hope that folks would reach out to either myself or reach out to ASU in general to learn more about Dr. Grigsby and his legacy. And if you would like to hear from Dr. Grigsby or Dr. Young, we can absolutely put their contact information in the chat in order for you to reach out to them. I believe, oh yes, Rashida, thank you, Rashida, my intern, Rashida Scott Blades, thank you so much for everything that you've done this evening. I greatly appreciate you and everyone here at ASU. We are so thankful to you all and to, again, Dr. Young and Dr. Grigsby for their time this evening in talking about the amazing legacy that Dr. Grigsby left for all of us. Any last words, gentlemen, about Dr. Grigsby?
Well, not so much about him, but thank you for what you
Yes.
have done and your team for doing this. He would have enjoyed it, no doubt about it. And he would be one of your strong cheerleaders saying, keep on doing what you're doing and spread the word so that more and more can be aware of what's happening in the area of inclusiveness and outreach that's taking place. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything that Dr. Grigsby said. It's always good to say Dr. Grigsby.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
always great to see you, Bernard.
Yes. Well, again, thank you, gentlemen. I greatly appreciate you and just everything. I look forward to us having a wonderful relationship moving forward, not just with this collection, but anything else that, is surrounding, art at ASU, the legacy of Dr. Grigsby, anything that, is of interest, please reach out to us. We would be happy to continue to keep highlighting the contributions of Black and African-American faculty, staff, and students here at ASU. And so please reach out to us if you would like to learn more about the collection, about Dr. Grigsby just in general, or anything that is upcoming where Black collections is concerned. We appreciate your time. Thank you. Take care all. Have a good evening. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.